Silence speaks volumes. That's what I've learned by studying the life of Jesus, who I believe is the greatest communicator of all. Even when he didn't say a word, he still made a statement. But today, I want us to see silence from a different angle because silence doesn't just say something in a conversation, silence says something about your growth. This is the Daily Recharge, an Endurance Movement original. I'm Reginald Hinton Jr., and welcome to today's opportunity to renew your thinking, align with God's design, and become who you really are. Today's recharge is simple. When growth gets quiet, it is still speaking. That's worth remembering. Write this down. Silence is a note to self and others. So what does silence really say about you? This verse showed me, and it was too good to keep to myself. We all fail in many areas, but especially with our words. Yet, if we're able to bridle the words we say, we are powerful enough to control ourselves in every way. And that means our character is mature and fully developed. That's James 3, verse 2 from the Passion Translation. First, silence says you've been molded. Think about pottery for a moment. Dishes, flower pots, and other items don't just pop out of clay ready to use. Someone must shape them. Someone must apply pressure. Someone must form them into what they were designed to become. That's what Holy Spirit does in us. James says if we can bridle our words, we are powerful enough to control ourselves in every way. But let me be clear, self-control is not naturally our specialty. It is the evidence of an inside agent doing an inside work. That agent is Holy Spirit. And here's the evidence. But the fruit of the Spirit, the result of his presence within us, is love or unselfish concern for others, joy, inner peace, patience, meaning not the ability to wait, but how we act while waiting, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. That's Galatians 5, verses 22 and 23 from the Amplified Bible. Second, silence says you're maturing. Listen again to this part of James 3, verse 2. Yet, if we're able to bridle the words we say, we are powerful enough to control ourselves in every way. And that means our character is mature and fully developed. That's from the Passion Translation. Silence means you're growing up. And that is wonderful news. Because when Holy Spirit helps you control what you say, when you say it, and whether you say anything at all, that is not a small thing. That is progress. That is development. That is growth getting quiet, but still becoming visible. You may not notice it at first. Others may not celebrate it immediately. But every time you refuse to release a reckless word, every time you pause before responding emotionally, every time you let wisdom lead instead of reaction, something is happening. You are moving closer to who God created you to be. And the bottom line is that silence says you're making progress. Let's make a note to self out of that. Write this down. Silence says you're making progress. And that's a great setup for the last thing silence says about you. Third, silence says you're mirroring the model. If you didn't know, here's what God is really up to. So we are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together for good, for we are his lovers who have been called to fulfill his design purpose. For he knew all about us before we were born, and he destined us from the beginning to share the likeness of his son. This means the son is the oldest among a vast family of brothers and sisters who will become just like him. That's Romans 8, 28 and 29 from the Passion Translation. God is not merely interested in you becoming your best self. He is forming you into the likeness of his son. That means when you learn to use silence the way Jesus used silence, you are not just improving a communication skill, you are becoming more like him. There's another note to self. Write this down. Silence says, I'm becoming more like Jesus. That's the real win. Because Jesus knew when to speak, and he knew when silence was wisdom. He knew when words would reveal truth, and he knew when restraint would reveal alignment. So when Holy Spirit helps you master the art of silence, God is shifting you into Christlikeness. And there is no better outcome in life than becoming like Jesus. Now let's review before we conclude today's video. First, silence says you've been molded. Next, silence says you're maturing. And most importantly, silence says you're mirroring the model, Jesus. So here's today's activation. Before one response this week, pause and ask God this question. Is this a moment to speak, or is this a moment to let silence speak? That one pause may reveal more growth than 1,000 words ever could. I've only shared a few amazing things about silence. What has silence helped you discover about your own growth? Let me know in the comments. And if this conversation resonates, don't forget to check out the podcast episode that started it. Why silence makes you a more powerful communicator. I'll leave a link in the description and accompanying blog post. When God says so, I'll be back with another video. Until then, let God renew your thinking, align your responses, and empower you to become who you really are. And when growth gets quiet, don't miss it. Silence may be speaking on your behalf. Have an incredible day.